Alrighty, so in the brand new update, Tycoon has just added the Z-10 helicopter. In today's video, guys, I will be fully damage testing it and telling you guys everything that this vehicle is actually good at. But before we begin, I'd like to quickly review the statistics. The base speed of it is going to be 200 and the health is going to be 750. When you fully max it out, the speed is going to be 260 and the health is going to be 975, which is definitely way above average in terms of the health. However, the speed seems to be staying as the average mark. So firstly, let's take a look at the missile damage against air vehicles. Firstly, it's going to be able to do exactly 21% against the F-35 per hit, and after all the 4 missiles, it will be able to get it to a very low amount of health, which is 24%. Now, in terms of the missile damage against the Mi-24 Super Hind, it will be able to do exactly 23%, and 4 missiles will be able to kill the Super Hind, which is, by the way, incredibly above average and is pretty much the best air missile damage out of any heli. Now, if you manage to actually hit these missiles against tanks, which are going to be unguided, you will be able to do exactly 20% per hit, meaning that after 4 hits, you'll be able to do around 80% of the Abrams X's health, which is absolutely insane if you're accurate. And once again, we can pretty much replicate exactly the same results against the LAVAD. Around 4 hits will be enough to pretty much destroy every single ground vehicle, so if you guys do have pretty good aim with this, then this is your kind of vehicle. Now moving on to the cannon damage against the F-35, and 1 hit will be able to do exactly 39%, and when we do actually unload all of the ammunition, you'll be able to destroy this vehicle actually quite quickly, and we can replicate exactly the same results against the Super Hind, doing 46 damage per hit, and once again, you can actually shred this thing quite quickly. This is definitely one of the better cannons in the game. Now, in terms of its anti-tank capabilities, it will be able to do exactly 2% per hit. However, the clip size is actually incredibly long, so you guys will actually be able to take down tanks without any kind of issue with this vehicle, which I think is actually really good. Again, you do have to be somewhat accurate with this. However, most of the time, people will be more accurate with this kind of cannon rather than a fixed cannon in terms of tank combat. And these results are once again replicated against the LAVAD, which I think this vehicle is overall going to be good in terms of ground combat, even though it doesn't really have that many capabilities. However, lastly, we do have the torpedoes to take a look at. So firstly, if you manage to land a direct hit against the LAVAD, you'll be able to do exactly 53% of its health, which is actually pretty high. However, if we take a look at its damage against the tanks, it'll be able to do exactly 34% of Abrams X's health, which is once again pretty insane considering you can use those torpedoes like bombs. Now lastly, the most important part, how good are these torpedoes actually at countering the submarines? They'll be able to do around 40% of the Los Angeles class damage once it's maxed out. Of course, keep in mind that the Z-10 is also maxed out in this video. And now the damage that it will do against a Zumwalt would be around 10%, which to be honest is just a decent amount of DPS. It's not going to be anything insane. However, do keep in mind the damage does have to stay relatively low so it doesn't just absolutely brutalize all the other lower ships in the game, which just simply do not have too much health. However, the issue with these torpedoes is that they are incredibly wacky in terms of their AI, so they're not gonna ever be very consistent. Do keep that in mind. And now finally, the big question here, are you guys gonna be able to use these torpedoes like bombs against the infantry? Well, the answer is going to be yes and no. This is definitely not gonna be able to penetrate buildings in terms of area damage. However, if you guys do manage to hit a pretty nice shot against someone on the ground who's just fighting another opponent, the area damage should be more than good enough, as you guys will be able to see by the test which I'm currently conducting. Anyway, for the time being, that's going to be it in terms of the Z-10. However, we still have the depth charges to test really quickly, but before we do that, I'd like to quickly give a review. The Z-10 is a very good helicopter, however, it does lack some ground capabilities, and the AI of the torpedoes might be a little terrible from time to time, so this heli is not going to be the most consistent. However, it's still amazing overall. Now, moving on to the damage for the depth charges for most of the ships in this game, they will be able to do around 35 to 40% on average against the LA class, so you have to actually hit 3 direct shots in order to actually hit them. However, keep in mind that the AI of the depth charges is always going to try to help you and kind of head towards the opponent itself. The overall damage will remain the same for pretty much every single ship in the game, because as you guys can see, I tested this against the Zumwalt first, but now against the Independence, and the results have seemed to stay quite the same, if not similar. So I will overall say that the depth charges are going to be very helpful. However, another thing that you could actually use them for is going to be the area damage. As you guys can see on this current clip, you will be able to actually kill some people on the ground if you do manage to get close enough to their base. But keep in mind that the range of these depth charges is not going to be too high. Anyway, for the time being, that's going to be everything I have for you guys in today's video in terms of damage tests for the new stuff that was added in this brand new update. However, there were some heavy balance changes which I'll be covering tomorrow, so make sure to stay notified just for that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. watching, and thank you so much to my channel members, and make sure to join the Discord server.